Good morning, everybody. How are you today? Thanks for coming. So we're going to start off today's meeting with a representative from Irvine Pacific, Cheryl Alexander. So Cheryl, you had 5 available homes just before you came here today. Now we're down to 3.
We're down to 3, correct. And they're all at Ravello. So we have 2 model homes and a regular Plan 2 production home, but we actually took a deposit on the Plan 2 model yesterday.
Oh, you did?
So now we're down to 2 homes.
Down to 2 homes. Would you
now,
the pressure?
Now, if for some reason the Plan 2 reservation doesn't work out on the model home, we'll put it back on the market. But prices start at 4.946 and 277. The co-op is 100,000. Our Plan 2 production home is 5.068, 511. That one is higher priced than the model because it has a better view. So that's all we have left for Irvine Pacific. And then once we're sold out of those, there's not going to be another opportunity to buy a new home from Irvine Pacific. You can find resale homes, of course, from buyers that previously purchased. HOA dues, we're revising the budget right now, so it's probably going to be in the 320 range. It is at reserve, so it's gated with a guard. Tax rates about 1.2%, includes the Melrose. So it's really
better than I expected.
Yeah. Any Irvine Company Village always has a lower Melrose, and the HOAs are pretty reasonable. And these are really close to the park and pool.
And then are these view or non-view offers? They are views.
Yeah, and the model homes come with the furniture and decor. And the furniture and decor has actually been discounted from what we originally paid 5 years ago. So I think our recovery is we discounted about 30%. And then the furniture is
pretty substantial.
Yeah.
So a home like that is probably $1.5 million in cost for them to identify.
So. Yeah, because all landscape, beautifully maintained. I mean, the models, they're kind of used because we've been showing them for the last 5 years, but they're in good condition. They still come with warranties also.
And then would you repeat the co-op once again?
100,000.
So that means $100,000 commission. That's what they're offering. Your timing is excellent.
And then if for any reason you don't have buyers looking for a quick move-in, because these can close immediately. If it's a cash buyer, we can probably close within 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. Financing, whatever you need for the financing aspect. But if you're looking for something that isn't going to close right away, there's merchant builders. And I'm actually going to be going to sell Fresco at Reserve in March. So those aren't built yet. So I think our first deliveries are going to be September, October.
So do you think Irvine Pacific is going to continue to offer compensation cooperating brokers?
No, I'm actually going to be changing companies.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I'll be at Fresco Reserve. So if anybody's interested or has any buyers interested, just let me know. Hit me up. Give me your card, and I'll send you information once I transition.
Great. So do you think the new developer you're working with offer compensation, cooperating compensation?
Most likely, yeah.
I see. Okay. And then would you just explain to them, if you could, what you believe the policy is going to be at the new track as to registering clients, what they must do to assure themselves that
probably the same thing. Most builders across the board, you need a pre-approval letter, down payment verification. You may have to qualify with the preferred lender because this builder does have a preferred lender.
Do you have a price range?
Not yet. We're scheduled to grand open mid-March, so I expect to go to sale around the same time.
And then
it's KB Homes.
I see. I see. The process for registration, if you would just, because we have some newer people, and just to remind other people what you must do to register a client to assure yourself of being compensated.
The first thing to do would maybe just go to their website and sign up on the general interest list, because anything that any new information is going to be rolled out to their interest list first.
So to register a client to be assured that you're being compensated, what must you do specifically? What is the order?
Accompany the client on their first visit.
So you can't just call you and say, you must accompany them on their first visit.
Correct. And also with Ravello, we're open by appointment. We're no longer on site. So if you want to just preview, we're hosting open houses on the weekend from 12 to 4, Saturday and Sunday. So if you have time, you can come by without making an appointment. Otherwise, you can schedule an appointment during the week or anytime outside of those open house hours. The sales counselors managing the community, they are asking for a pre-approval letter and down payment verification prior to making an appointment, just because we get a lot of people that just want to look. we have to keep driving back and forth. It's just not a good time for looky-loos. But if you have a real buyer, it's absolutely, please schedule the appointment, bring them.
Okay. Any questions for Charles?
That's the square footage of the home.
Ravello?
Yeah, whatever you want.
Plan 1 is 3227, and the plan 2 is 3348. 4 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, and a family lounge.
You've got 3 clients? Okay.
Really?
And you only have 2 homes remaining?
There's only 2 right now. The plan 2 model's been reserved.
Oh.
If it could sell before the end of the week, and if that happens, then there'll be 2.
Any other questions for Cheryl? No? Cheryl, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
They're really cute. So help yourself. I don't know if I brought enough for everyone, but
First come, first serve, right?
thank you so much for letting me through.
All right, Cheryl, thank you for coming today. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, come on up. Yeah, don't. Come on up. Now's the time. Richard's running up there. Morning.
I'll text you.
Morning once again. So today's discussion, condominiums and common interest development disclosures. I think there's a lot of misconception as to what defines each. So what is a common interest development? So a CID. It's descriptive not only of a certain type of real estate and form of home ownership, but it's a lifestyle. And it's becoming more and more common. It's important to know there's no one structural type, architectural style, or standard size for common interest developments. They come in a variety of types and styles. It could be single family homes, detached 2-story condos, garden style units, and it could be apartments and multi-story high rises. So in California, there's tens of thousands of common interest developments that range in size from 2-unit developments to a large complex. So, but despite the wide range of differences that may exist, all common interest developments are similar in that they allow individual owners the use of common property and facilities and provide a system for self-governance through the association of the homeowners. So the most common type of association of homeowners is a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation. So for the most part, any HOA that you encounter, it is a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation. And there are members of the corporation, and there's a board of directors, and they vote for the officers that run the affairs of the corporation. So when you think about a new development, and we were just speaking to somebody from Irvine Pacific, what takes place during the process when the builder owns the standing inventory? Well, they're paying those HOA dues, first of all, until their property is sold, but then they also control the board of directors. So they have complete authority over what's taking place with that corporation in regards to managing the affairs of the HOA. And then as all the units are sold out over time, the directors that are appointed by the corporation that built the project, they're ultimately removed from the board of directors. So common interest developments, what's included? Condominiums, community apartment projects, stock cooperatives, and planned developments, also known as planned unit developments. Those are the various types of common interest developments in California. A planned development, also you'll see PUD, and there's another term, planned residential development, or PRD. They're essentially the same. It's a category of common interest developments under the Davis-Sterling Act. Some governing documents use the term planned unit development. Some use PD, some use PRD. So unlike a condominium project, which is actually created in statute, so we have lawmakers that created this, the planned unit development uses traditional property concepts. In a planned development, ownership includes an individual interest in a parcel of land, usually a subdivision lot, and the structural improvements situated on the lot. So in contrast, a condo is defined as an estate and real property consisting of an undivided interest in a proportion of real property coupled with a separate interest called unit. I'm going to define these for you. So if we're talking about a planned unit development, there are many in Irvine. I live in Codo, and that's a planned unit development, for example. So there are master HOA documents that control the association. There are common areas which benefits everybody that is a member of that community. So you can have a single family home, you own the lot, and you also own the improvements on the lot.
So you said that's the case with some condos too, right?
No,
Okay.
it is not the case with condos, but common interest developments define homes that are single family properties in which you own the property and you own all the improvements on that lot, versus a condominium, which also falls under the category of common interest development, but you don't own the land beneath the structure. So a huge difference when you think about that, yeah. Owning land and not owning land. In regards to condos, unless the condominium plan provides otherwise, and this is always very important because we always want, what does a person own and what are they insuring when they buy a condo? If walls, floors, or ceilings are designated as boundaries of a separate interest, the interior surfaces of the perimeter walls, floors, and ceilings, windows, doors, and outlets located within the separate interest are a part of the separate interest, and I'll define this, and any other portions of the walls, floors, or ceilings are part of the common area. So, and that's regulated by Civil Code 4185. So what is that saying? If we have a condominium and there's attached walls, unless further defined in the CC&Rs, the studs are common area, the drywall on top of those studs, the flooring you install, the tile flooring you installed on top of the floor is your property. You don't own the studs. So when you hear about different endorsements for condominiums, they want to know, they're insuring the personal effects of that condominium. So many times people think, well, the HOA complex is carrying insurance on my behalf. I don't need homeowners insurance. Well, that's far from the case, because the windows, the doors, the drywall, the flooring you installed, the cabinets, that is all your property. And that is a separate interest. Whereas the studs in between the wall, that's shared proportionally between all homeowners in the complex. So a huge difference, as a matter of fact. So when people ask you about getting insurance, or I think it's an HO6 endorsement for an insurance policy, then you should say, yes, definitely you should be getting an insurance policy, because if that place burns down, are you going to be able to pay to do everything from the studs up in that property?
So Rich, even the condos that are separate, that are detached on their own, you don't own the land on those?
Typically, no, but that's going to be a part of the legal description. But if it's termed a condominium, you do not own the land beneath that structure. Now, in structures that you're talking about where it's a detached condominium, most likely the homeowner is responsible for all aspects of that structure. The exterior, the roof, so on and so forth.
And you can tell on title, because when it's a condo, you don't own a lot. It always says like a 1/38 interest.
Yeah, so undivided interest, right?
If you look at a prelim and you see a fractional interest, then it would not be single. It would have to be a condo.
It would, yes.
That's how generally you can tell.
Then other questions that come up, I don't remember the line item, the seller property questionnaire, but there's specifically a question asking whether or not the property is a part of a condominium or a planned unit development. So for the most part, if it's a single family home and there's some type of an association that single family home is a part of, it most likely is within a planned unit development. You should be checking the box, yes, because the HOA has control over the architectural aspects, painting, so on and so forth.
Hi, Rich. I have a question.
What was that?
I have a question. So for the TDS or SPU, I cannot remember which one you're talking about. So if we check that box, do we need to put like a explanation under, just saying like there's HOA or CC and R for details? We need a yes, we should explain that, right?
That's correct. So on a TDS or the seller property questionnaire, remember, if you respond yes to any of those questions, it asks for an explanation. Keep in mind, you should be completing that explanation, because the other party could say, you delivered this to me and it's not complete. So we don't want to be in that kind of position that we're re-delivering these disclosures. But with that said, yes, anytime you check a yes box, you should be giving an explanation. It could be as simple as it's located in a PUD, a planned unit development, or it's a condominium. Just to confirm that.
The explanation, right? Not the
Thank you for correcting me, Carlos, but the sellers don't know. That's what I realized when I see most seller disclosures. They don't understand. So you should be helping them with those disclosures. And if you see an error in their disclosures, you should be pointing that out to them and asking them to consider amending it. Yes, Richard.
Richard, you have to recommend to the buyer for condominium to have a homeowner insurance, right? Because anything happened to that condominium, burned out, as you said, anything that person touched the wall, anything touchable is personal belonging.
Yes, it's their individual property that's not insured by the master association policy.
Or different, they have to pay.
Yes, yes, correct.
All the condominiums like this, all of them?
I would say virtually all. I'm not aware of any in which the drywall would be maintained by the HOA, as a matter of fact, for example.
So highly recommended to.
Oh yeah, they should. If they ask you, yeah, well, home warranty, that's a separate issue, but the home warranty is going to cover a fire. But yes, they should be getting their own insurance endorsement to cover the interior of the property. Right. Absolutely. So let's continue with condominiums now.
Excuse me. Hi, Richard.
Hi.
So plan unit development on an MLS, it said so, or it's our job to go and find it somewhere else?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
You know, on an MLS, does it state that it's a plan unit development, or we should do more searching ourselves?
Well, I would say it's dependent upon the listing agent, because just because they posted something, it doesn't mean it's accurate. So that's the dilemma. Is the information that the listing agent posted on the MLS accurate? That's a good question. But you should find out. I think typically it's not, you're going to see that once you get the prelim, you can make that determination. If it's a planned unit development, you'll look at the legal description, or if it's a condominium. So in terms of spending a lot of time up front trying to research that, I don't know if it's worth your time. Once you get all those disclosures, you get the prelim, for example, you can then make an accurate determination.
Thank you.
I think the other thing that we see in many cases with people that are selling homes, for some reason, they don't necessarily tell you there could be 1, 2, or 3 associations and dues with all of those associations. So if you're listing your property, you should be questioning that. As a matter of fact, if you're representing a buyer, you should find out. Transactions closed, and the buyer, unfortunately, has not been made aware that there's more than one HOA. Now, if you look closely at the prelim, you probably can make a determination that there's more than one HOA. There's going to be CC&Rs for each association that has control over that property. So review the prelim just to be sure.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Rich, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hey, my question for you is, so if we want to find out that information, so is that prelim the only source we can find out? Can we just find that information from somewhere else before, maybe sometimes, we just talk to the clients. We haven't signed the listing agreement yet. We don't want just order, prelim, we haven't signed the listing contract yet. So is there anywhere we can find that information?
Well, I think the easiest thing to do, what I would do, I would actually look at any other properties listed in the area just to get an idea how many HOA fees. Masu's shaking his head no, but it gives you some indication. You can call title also. Other than that, it's pretty difficult until you get the prelim to make a determination just how many, if any, HOAs are associated with that property. I don't know of any other single source that's going to reveal that.
Okay. I just kind of
download one when it says HOA amount. If you look at properties, they only pick up the first one, and if
they total it together, right?
They don't always take it together.
I see. So John was just telling me that on Zillow, for example, which is not a good source for information, they may or may not put the correct amount of HOA dues. Sometimes they may total, and other times they may just not include all monthly dues that may be required. So yeah, I wish there was some other specific area to look before besides asking the client, but you would think people know what they're spending money on, but they don't always recall. So condos, questions that come up. Members own airspace. They own their unit, plus an undivided interest in the common areas surrounding their airspace. So most commonly, when you buy a condo, you own the airspace within the condo itself and an interest in the condominium association or the not-for-profit legal entity that owns the land on which the building stands. So what does that mean? The land beneath the condo is not owned by the condo owner. You, as a person who owns a condo, own a pro rata interest in the entity that owns the land. There's a corporation that owns the land, a corporation that manages the association. And that's what owns the land beneath the condo. In addition to that, the common areas. So in a planned unit development, members typically own the lot, right? You'll look at a tract map and you'll see a lot number, and some or all the improvements are actually on that lot. So typically when someone installs landscaping, it likely is going to be their property, as a matter of fact. In addition to that, the entire structure. So PUDs are defined as having either or both of the following. A common area is owned either by an association or in common by the owners of a separate interest who possess appurtenant rights to the beneficial use and enjoyment of the common area. So what does that mean? I live in a PUD. I have the right to use the common area facilities. That's what it's saying.
Parks, pools.
Parks, well, it
areas,
depends, right?
Like
there may be separate clubs or memberships for other amenities, but typically parks, things like that, and all the common areas you see are maintained by that HOA in which that planned unit development falls. Just because it's a single family home does not mean that there is not an HOA. Likely there is. Also, the other thing that typically is included within a planned unit development is a common area and an association that maintains the common area with the power to levy assessments that may become a lien. So actually the HOA, if for non-payment, can lien your property and they can actually foreclose on that property and force a sale. Associations' common areas often consist of amenities such as private streets, green belts, parks, clubhouses, swimming pools, golf course, equestrian facilities, so on and so forth. It's not always clear when somebody buys a condominium on the exterior what is going to be maintained by the property owner versus that of the HOA. Sometimes gates leading into the entry of the unit may not be maintained. So there are HOAs that publish a list of those items that dictate who is responsible for the maintenance of certain areas. I don't know if that's always available to you, but that's something to give consideration to. So when you're buying a unit in a condominium or a PUD, the buyer typically is also purchasing a pro rata share of the common area, or the buyer has an interest in the association that owns the common area. So what does that mean in either case? That means the buyer is going to be paying HOA dues. The buyer could be subject to special assessments also. So why would special assessments be issued? Well, maybe if it's a condo, the roof was ripped off and the reserves or the budget is not there to replace the roof. And then typically PUDs, even though it's a single family home and condos, they have restrictions over architectural guidelines, things of that nature. You can't paint your house any specific color that you want without their approval. And then what's interesting about this, so all of this is because of our lawmakers, and it's referenced by Civil Code 4000 through 6150, the Davis-Sterling Act. That is the main driver behind all this. So you may probably see things referencing the Davis-Sterling Act. Then also you'll see other aspects, Civil Code 4525, and you'll see that in the purchase contract when it talks about who's paying for the common interest disclosures. So Civil Code 4525 mandates that the seller pay for virtually almost all of the common interest disclosure fees. If there's a lender certification, then that's not something that's imposed upon the seller. It is the buyer's obligation to pay something like that. I just want to go through the different disclosures that are required in a new common interest development. So advisability of title insurance, it's rare. If there's no title insurance, then there has to be notification given. And this is important, agency disclosure and confirmation. If there is a public report, agency disclosure is not required. So for every property in which it's residential 1 to 4 units, even if there's a commercial aspect to it, and we're representing a buyer, we're obligated to give them agency disclosure. However, if it's a new housing tract, for example, and there's a public report, the agency disclosure is not required, although I have to say in most purchase contracts from developers, which are all proprietary, I typically see an agency disclosure. So anyone, can you tell me what a public report is? You go to a new housing tract, I'm going to give you a public report. What is it? Well, the developer, before selling 5 or more homes in a tract, must apply for a public report, and there's a lot of disclosures in there. So I think the analogy would be if somebody is going to be selling stock, they have to be approved in advance for selling that stock. So that's exactly what it takes with a developer. Through the Department of Real Estate, they file applications. They get something called a pink report initially, which allows them to take reservations, and then a white report, which is actually the public report. It talks about ordinance, things like that. So with that, they can actually then open escrow. But also, if they have a public report, they're not required to provide an agency disclosure. In addition to that, if they have a public report, they're not required to provide a TDS also. Yes.
Certificate of occupancy, is that part of that public report, or is separate?
It would be separate.
Separate.
Yeah. Yeah, the public report is going to be issued well in advance, actually, so they can open escrow. If you think about the lead time, it could be 8 or 10 months for a house to be actually completed, maybe longer.
Richard, sometimes they call it white paper or white report.
Yes, a white report. The white report is right. It's the same as a public report, correct? Because when the DRE issues a report, they give a pink report. It's on pink paper. It says you can take reservations, but
I see sometimes in white, sometimes in pink.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
So if it's a reservation, your money really is not at risk. But if the public report is given to you and you deposit money, your deposit is at risk at that point in time. Escrow has been open. And actually, some of these projects, and I think with these larger builders, there's nothing to be concerned about. But when somebody's developing a project and they're financing it, which is quite common, obviously, there's going to be a blanket encumbrance against that property, meaning there's a construction loan for $10 million and there's 10 homes. So when each property is sold and closed, a pro rata portion of that $10 million loan is paid off. So it has to be reconveyed, and that's something you have to be sure of that's taking place, as a matter of fact. Most banks, they just want to accept 1/10. They want an accelerated repayment schedule. So often when builders have 10 homes on a tract, and let's assume it's a $10 million loan, $1 million for each property, they may be paying as much as $1.2 million or $1.5 million on the initial properties that close. So when they get to their ending inventory, all their money's tied up in that inventory because they have no further encumbrances on maybe those 1 or 2 units at the very end. So keep that in mind when you're negotiating. Now, the moment I was here, I asked her if there are any incentives that they're offering, and she said, quite frankly, no. And I thought, on a $5 million property, that's quite a statement, right? I only have 2 left now. One is possibly going into escrow. But I'm sure you can ask. That's what she told me. You can ask. Joyce, what's your experience? You sell a lot of new homes. Are you getting them to make concessions?
They always got the room for all different
negotiations. Yeah. So there's a possibility. There's a possibility. Now, if the property is 4 units and less, and there could be a blanket encumbrance on there, it could be an issue. So the developer would have to give a notice that the encumbrance isn't being paid off. And even if in that scenario where it's not these major builders and the blanket encumbrance exists, maybe it could be a lease on the land. If they default, you could lose your property as the structure owner. So keep that in mind. And then let's go down the disclosure. So are you required to inspect the diligent visual inspection if there's a public report? You're not. We probably ask for the AVID that you do your inspection. They have to disclose if there's death in the property. They have to disclose the earthquake fault zone. If it's an FHA buyer, then there's an inspection notice. And then also builders are subject to the same requirements that we are with FERPTA. So the builder must supply the exemption notice. So the buyer is not required to perform withholding on the proceeds. And then also gas and hazardous liquid transmission pipeline notice. Something else that really doesn't come into play around here is a groundwater basin comprehensive adjudication notice. And that just simply is a judge determining who has water rights. And also they must provide homeowners association documents. And then for properties where the developer is required to give a public report, say new home tracts, they're required to do the following. As soon as possible, they're required to give the CC&Rs to the buyer, articles of incorporation, the bylaws, any other instruments that indicate or define a common interest development, then also current financial information and related statements. And also they're required to notify you of any delinquencies with HOA dues, whether it's themselves or somebody else that's occupying properties that have closed. And then if the project is not subject to a public report, then the buyer must be provided with all of the governing documents. So in the common interest development, if there's a statement describing restrictions as to occupancy or residency or use on a separate basis, for the most part, if there's an occupancy restriction based upon age, it's probably not enforceable unless there for certain age groups, it is enforceable. Laguna Woods, for example. And then, and also when we talk about occupancy, the other thing that's important now, many times the CC&Rs or one of the disclosures will describe to you the fact that maybe property is not available for short-term rentals. So it's something else to keep in mind based upon whatever your buyer's intention is with that property. If they just want to rent it out to on Airbnb, or are they going to occupy it for a long-term or maybe a long-term lease? And then so other things for you to keep in mind, questions always come up, what should I be doing on behalf of my buyer when I receive the common interest disclosures? Well, you should be pointing out a few different things. The budget's very important. The budget is also going to tell you if the reserves are underfunded or not. So if at this point in time, we know that the roof replacement is going to be $100,000 and it's a year before the scheduled roof replacement, and we only have $10,000 in the reserves, theoretically, we're only about 12 or 13% funded at this point in time. So that tells you that there's a possibility there could be special assessments at some time in the future, or at minimum that you should expect your HOA dues to go up. I'm not here to kill a transaction, but it's something that you should be cognizant of, as a matter of fact. And I see many financial statements that indicate reserves that are underfunded in HOA projects.
Drastically, or?
Yeah, I see a lot of 25 to 30%, as a matter of fact. And then if it's so underfunded, then a traditional Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac lender will not even loan on the project. And that would then deem to be a non-warrantable condo, for example. It's not going to apply to a single family home. So you won't be able to get traditional financing if it's removed from Fannie Mae's guidelines or from their approved condominium list. So that means your interest rate is going to be substantially higher. Then other things you should be aware of. First of all, the seller has an obligation to notify you of any infractions or deficiencies or non-payment. So maybe there's a metal fence in the backyard and the HOA is demanding that they repaint it. That's a deficiency. If you're representing the buyer, you should be sure to look at that documentation so to demand that the seller obviously correct any of those deficiencies. And then if there's litigation or dispute between the builder and the association, for example, that must be disclosed. If there's a settlement between the builder and association, that must be disclosed. And then any change in the association's current regular and special assessments and fees, that have been approved but not yet due and payable. That requires disclosure. And then if there's provisions in the governing documents that prevent rentals or leasing of the separate units. Before, there were restrictions recorded that would limit the number of rentals to maybe 20 or 25%. California law now has voided that, made it unenforceable, as a matter of fact. And then the other thing that's really important you should be looking at are the minutes. So you are entitled to 1 year's worth of minutes of the meetings. Now, not every single association holds a meeting every month, but look at the minutes. It's going to describe to you if there are discussions about special assessments or other issues that possibly a homeowner may face upon the close of escrow. And then let's see other things, industrial use. So there's a number of things that are covered by the NHD report, as a matter of fact. And here's something that's important to me. The notice of private transfer fee, it doesn't have to be disclosed if it's recorded. And then if anyone has looked at the TDS, specifically section 16, C16, page 2, it talks about, and this is a question that always comes up, any lawsuits by or against the seller threatening to or affecting this real property, claims for damages by the seller pursuant to section 910 or 914, threatening to or affecting this real property, claims for breach of warranty pursuant to section 900, threatening to or affecting the real property, or claims for breach of an enhanced protection agreement pursuant to section 903. I'm going to define this. Threatening to or affecting this real property, including any lawsuits for claims for damage pursuant to section 910. 914, alleging a defect or deficiency in this real property or common areas facilities, such as pools, tennis courts, walkways, and other areas, co-owned in undivided interest with others. So what is that saying? It's referring to Senate Bill 800. Typically, with most new housing tracts today, there is a process you must go through that's deemed to be so-called non-adversarial. I'm going to get that word out. Non-adversarial. That's the word, as a matter of fact. So that means you can't just necessarily sue a builder for a defect. You have to go through a process. That process could be claim a breach of warranty. So with this non-adversarial process, that specifically affects section 16 on page 2 of the TDS. There could be a claim for a builder defect, things of that nature. Now, homeowners that do this to themselves is very interesting to me. So they start this claim, then they want to sell the property, and now they have a disclosure issue because there's a claim of a defect or deficiency in the property. Could be minimal. So if I'm a homeowner, I'm going to give that consideration because at some point in time, I'm going to be selling this house. And do I want to have a formal complaint under this process filed that I'm going to have to disclose all that information? So I think they need to weigh the materiality of any type of a claim, as a matter of fact, with a new housing tract. If it's a condominium, the HOA is probably going to engage in litigation. There's nothing you can do in that regard anyways, if there are defects that are uncovered. And then other things, smoke detector compliance, statement of compliance, whether it's in a flood hazard zone, state responsibility areas, and that's talking about fire once again, or home hardening. And then let's see, and then the subdivision public report, this is what we're talking about, the white report, must be given to a prospective buyer prior to the execution of a binding contract if the subdivision is subject to the subdivided lands laws. So we talked about a pink report. It allows a builder to take reservations, but before entering escrow, the public report, or also known as the white report, must be given to the buyer first. And then also, there's no TDS required if a public report is available. Then also, they have the same disclosures issues with water heater bracing. I don't know how many hot water heaters are installed in new homes today, as a matter of fact. And then window security bars, release mechanisms. And then a couple of things that come up. How soon must a homeowners association comply with a request for HOA documents? They have 10 days to send out the documents. That's it. So it's not that much time, but in a transaction, that's a lot of time. So we hear many times escrow wondering if you want to special order or rush them. There's always an additional cost. Remember, the RPA mandates that the seller order those documents within 3 days following execution of the purchase contract.
Sorry, who gives the documents to the buyer?
Who gives them to them? It's the seller's obligation, but typically escrow is going to be the one who's going to be accommodating that. So escrow is going to contact the seller, ask for a credit card, order the HOA docs, and then distribute those to everybody.
Okay.
And then the
10 days, right?
buyer has
Pardon me?
planted
10 days.
acknowledgement that they received.
10 days.
Seller has to send it to the.
No, once the contract is executed, the seller has 3 days to order the docs. And the HOA has 10 days upon receiving the order to fulfill the order, provide those HOA documents. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So that's a lot of time. And then we talk about the fees. Well, that's supposedly regulated by statute also. It's crazy how expensive these HOA docs are. Supposedly they can only charge for the actual cost of providing their documents. But if they use a third-party service, they can also charge for the third-party service. And then there's been a court case in which the court allowed the HOA to charge more than whatever their total cost was. So when I see expenses of $700 to $1,000, it makes me question. And also there's an aspect of the regulation that prohibits them for charging for electronic delivery. It's got to be the simplest form of delivery, right? I would think, instead of sending out those old binders or stacks of paper.
Yeah, there's no cost for printing, for mailing. It's just emailed, right?
It's emailed, yeah. It's emailed.
File, just forward an email.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the times things don't change that often. I think the minutes change, or maybe there's litigation. That's something that comes up. So remember, in a planned unit development, it's a single family home. Who owns the land beneath the property? The homeowner,
yeah.
Right, the homeowner owns the land beneath the property. In a condominium, who owns the land beneath the property?
Shared interest,
The
right?
nonprofit mutual corporation. It's typically a nonprofit mutual corporation that owns that, and the person that owns the condo per se owns an interest in that corporation. So where is the dividing line for a person that owns a condo? What do they own inside that condo?
The walls, the floor.
Everything that you can touch.
Yeah, anything you can touch first. So that's right. Anything behind those walls, I think that's a good way of putting it. The electrical probably, because they're saying the outlets are property, are separate interests. That is the term versus a common interest.
Richard, I heard this beachside, oceanside land is not owned by the homeowner.
Oh, I think there's a lot of property that are long-term leases.
Even California.
Oh yeah, go down to Balboa. There are properties that are sitting there.
Where's
Newport,
Beach?
yeah,
Huntington Beach.
many of those mobile home parks.
So those
Or
only $18-20 million, they don't own the land.
well, they're not paying 18 or 20 million for lease land, but it's a lot less expensive. But the monthly lease is very high. And then what happens at the end of a lease? What if you buy a house that's on lease land? What happens at lease termination, assuming the lessor does not renew the lease?
You get to move your house.
No, it stays there. That's their property.
They get to keep it.
Yeah, they keep everything in that property, all the improvements. That's typically the way those long-term leases are designed.
So if the homeowner wants to sell the house with 10 years left of the lease, instead of $5 million, he can sell it for $100,000.
Yeah,
for example.
Yeah, and remember, if you're getting traditional financing, if the lease term is remaining is less than 30 years, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac will not loan
Who
it.
owns the land then by the beach side of the California?
That's a good question. Could be a corporation, could be a family that's owned it for years.
Or individual?
Could be, yeah.
Mobile home park.
It doesn't mean that it's not regulated by the Coastal Commission or something like that, but yeah.
So in those situations, do they usually just renew the lease, or like and just raise the land lease? Or?
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. What I would say, upon the expiration of a long-term land lease, whomever owns their property is going to say, what is the highest and best use for this property? So if I don't renew the lease for all these homeowners, can I then build a 30-unit apartment building there and put docks out front?
So they could just kick everybody out.
Yeah.
And in this particular, I guess, scenario, it's the RCJC. Or the Tenant Protection Act?
Well,
they're not tenants, but I guess they are, right? Because they're leasing the land.
They're landlords, so very well. I don't know if it's going to change anything in regards to lease termination, but it could, right?
Yeah.
If they have
How
to
long
renew.
can they stay there before they?
Yeah, there's I don't know, someone came to me with a project just recently, and there's only a few years left, and the claim is, and I don't doubt this, any of the homeowners were not aware that it was a long-term lease. I don't know how you can't know that, but there's maybe 5 years remaining on the lease, the land lease, and now it's being contested. It's going to be a lot of unhappy people.
Richard, what is the benefit of buying condos other than the price? Because the price is more lower than single family home. What is the benefit? You pay $500-600 HOA limitation. You have to listen to HOA. You're not really owning the place. What is the benefit?
Well, I would say even in a planned unit development, you're still regulated by an HOA. So in a planned unit development, you own the land, you own the single family home. You still have to go to the HOA to paint your house, your landscaping. So all those things are still regulated. And in a condominium, it's the same thing. I guess the benefit is, what is the cost of you maintaining a home versus a condominium? Is there any savings by paying those HOA dues? Because theoretically, they manage or maintain the exterior of the property, the streets, so on and so forth. Something that an individual homeowner would actually
pays. Sorry, single family home $75 to $120 even in good areas. HOA.
Oh yeah, that's because it's in a planned unit development.
Beautiful home for $2.53 million. They pay $75 to $100 HOA. That's all.
Well, I don't think there's any that are that low. There's none that are that low.
Maybe now, 2 years ago.
College Park.
Yeah. Well, I know when I lived in Codo till a few years ago, it was $300-something a month. That was no individual benefit for me, but all the common areas they maintained.
One thing on the lease, and there's a couple different kinds of leases, like in the desert where it's Indian land, a lot of times are 99-year leases, and then maybe after, when there's about 30 or 40 years left, they'll extend them potentially on the desert. Other ones, like in Huntington Beach and Newport that I know, they have where when you buy the property, you have a buyout of the lease to own the property, but it escalates. So I remember I had a client that originally when they bought the house, the lease buyout was about $50,000. This is years ago. By the time they bought it out 15 or 20 years ago, it was like $200,000. And I know in East Bluff and Back Bay, there are houses there where a lot of those are leased, and almost all of them have been bought out, but it got to where I had seen one where it was $1 million home or $1.2 million, way under market, but the buyout was $750,000 because it keeps escalating every year. So it's kind of interesting how that all works. So you kind of have to look at all of that when you're pricing them.
Kimberly, you had a question?
Well, and so I wanted to say one of the other things is I know, like, I'm in a condo. Okay, so coming down here was very interesting. But so in mine, also it covers my water and my garbage. So in those fees, or there might be something that they're adding to that you as a homeowner aren't paying. The other thing I would say that was very interesting to me is the fact that I've always owned a home, so I always own the land. So now that I'm in a condo, it's interesting when Orange County taxes me for multiple different taxes. I'm like, but I don't even own the land. So
don't own the land, yeah.
It's very interesting to me because I'm like, what are you still because I don't.
Why are they taxing you on the land, right?
What are they taxing me on the land for? Whatever. There's one above me, there's one below me. I'm like, we're all being taxed the same, which I thought was very interesting. So.
That is, you would think the corporation would be taxed and then they would just pass it on to you. Okay. So remember, you look at a tax bill, you'll see the tax base is broken out between the land and the structure. Also, that's what Kimberly was referring to. And on condominium, even though you don't own the land, her tax bill is showing that she's being taxed on the value of the land still.
Yeah, so is everybody else.
So is everybody. I don't know if it makes you feel better, but yeah. And then the other question that comes up: townhomes. Well, townhome, it's a condo. I think a townhome just simply describes a structure. People believe it's a townhome because maybe there's 2 stories.
Duplex is condo, right?
What?
Duplex.
No, not necessarily. What's the legal description? That's what's going to determine. The duplex is not necessarily a condo.
Which is townhome.
There could be for as simple as 2 units. It could fall under a common interest development as either a PUD Or there could be CC&Rs or associated with that, but there may not be any management company associated with that. So that's something else to see a lot in Newport. There are duplexes and there are condominiums, but there is no management company. So it's just the two homeowners who are then regulating or dictating what's taking place.
Wouldn't you say a townhouse is a condo where generally there's no one below you or up and down on the structure, but it's legally a condo, but it's just a description. And it's kind of funny how they have that in MLS because it's not a legal description anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's pretty broad.
Typically, it's like a two-story condo is pretty much what it.
Right, but usually there's no one below you when they consider it a townhouse. So where a condo, you could have someone directly below you. That's how I've always interpreted it, but it's not hard and fast. It's not hard and fast.
Yeah, it's not, unfortunately. So that's the end of my presentation. Anybody have any questions? So now we all know the difference between a condo and a planned unit development, right?
What happens when the HOA defaults on a property? Or is that
when they foreclose on a property?
I'm sorry, yeah. So when they foreclose on a property.
And
so like what? So let's say what happens to the homeowner? They get kicked out.
They could if it's allowed to happen. So they'll report a lien and then start the foreclosure proceeding. It could cause the sale of the property. But anything that they're going to receive is subject to any encumbrances that are senior. So there could be a first deed of trust, a second deed of trust. There could be a federal tax lien associated with our property.
And where do the proceeds go?
Well, the proceeds actually, if the HOAs, let's assume they're in third position. There's a first and second deed of trust, a mortgage deed of trust. So if the HOA forecloses, the initial proceeds are going to go first to the senior lien holder, the lien holder in second position, and if there's any proceeds available to the foreclosing party, the HOA in this case, if there's any proceeds remaining after that, it goes to the homeowner. So the foreclosing party doesn't get to keep all the proceeds. They're entitled to recover the monies that are owed and the cost of collection.
Have you seen that happen? I mean,
HOAs?
Yeah.
I haven't been to a sale in which there's been an HOA. Yeah, I've seen many HOAs lien property and start the process. Absolutely.
Just curious.
That's common. Sometimes people don't realize they're getting their HOA bills and they're just not paying them.
So for the 5 units or more condo or single family home, they have to come up with a public report to the buyer, or buyer agent has to request from the
No, the developer in your example has to provide that before they can open escrow.
Oh,
it's for new homes.
If they don't have it, they cannot open escrow.
Correct.
Lisa has a question.
Lisa, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
It sounds like I don't hear as much benefit to not persuading, but to having a buyer be interested in a condo versus a purchase, unless they don't want the upkeep. But why wouldn't, if they're looking for no upkeep? I mean, the tax benefit might not be big enough to become a homeowner for a condo versus a single family home. I don't know. It seems like the condo didn't sound really great after this meeting.
I don't know. I think, to the homeowner, I think it's transparent. But if you think about it, if anybody is renting, where have rents gone?
Right.
It's continued to escalate. And
right.
then who builds wealth in this country? People that own some form of real estate.
Right.
So there's just such a significant number of people. If you own real estate, you think about it, inflation has been terrible, yes. But then again, that cost of that property has gone up because of inflation. You don't own real estate, you're paying rent, the rents continue to go up. So I still think that you're building equity.
Right. I thought that would be the bottom line, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
also,
thank you.
Yeah,
if you're looking at a condo versus a single family, on a single family, you might get 1,200 square feet, but in a condo for the same price, you might get 1,700 or 1,800 square feet in a similar type of area. So you can get a lot more house. You don't have as much yard, but for living, if you need it, there's definitely benefits for a condo.
Yeah, I think individual homeowners sometimes don't maintain their property very well.
Yeah.
So if you buy a single family home and it hasn't been maintained in the exterior, the expense. So I think there's benefit and certainly lack of maintenance.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? Oh, no hands waving. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. If there's any further questions, now's the time. Yep. Okay. Thanks. Good to see everybody. Thanks for coming today.
Thursday's class.
Okay, so let me.
Oh yeah, Thursday's class. It's going to be a repeat of the discussion about Prop 19. So if you wish to attend to get more detail, I will see you Thursday morning at Carlos's class.
Bio lease, like for example. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
I know in Huntington.
Prop 19. Okay.